My name is Nick. I'm heading the DevRel team at Spectral Cloud. I've been working with Kubernetes about, as far as I remember, like the last 6 years, both, like working on the CNI, CSI, both in engineering, product management. And I've been working closer to the community for the past 3 years. So going around, conferences, giving talks, trying to also give back to the community, basically. So the topic of my presentation for KCD Austria was centered around how to solve cluster imbalance and resiliency as clusters tend to scale. Because what I've noticed when I really started, with this Kubernetes journey was, although Kubernetes is a highly dynamic system, it doesn't have any easy way to reschedule workloads around. And coming from a more like virtualization, VMware background, for me it was sort of a given. In VMware we have this distributed resource scheduling that is there that can shuffle things around depending on your cluster size. And then the second thing was with Kubernetes, there's another sort of issue which, Kubernetes is considered as a cloud de facto operating system. However, Kubernetes, all its components run as services, so it's really easy to signal to the OS that something is going wrong. But Kubernetes as a system and as an OS, it's difficult for the OS to signal something is going wrong to Kubernetes so that it can take action based on that. So the session was also how to sort of, solve that issue. The idea is if you have something wrong in the system, how can you make Kubernetes aware that something is wrong, and then as a second step, take some actions like, tainting the node and rescheduling pod from that node to another node, or maybe as a consequence, also trigger the creation of another node. So the session was around, different tools that we can put together to solve this kind of issue. So things like cluster autoscaler combined with node problem detectors, combined with the descheduler. So you can have like high memory pressure, CPU pressure, a problem with storage. You can have typically, misconfigurations when people start using things like VPA, HPA because they want to scale. If you don't have the right amount of, requests and limits that is set, you can have the node like misbehaving in such a way that either you end up with potential node failure or just pod evicting for apparently no reason, or like loss of performance in the pod, even though you may have nodes that would be able to satisfy the requirement for the pod. Those pods are not rescheduled. I goes around, what can impact the stability of the node. So effectively, you mentioned networking. So like network policy configuration is one of them. Misconfiguration of request limits or no configuration. Typically, when you start deploying Kubernetes, you don't necessarily think about, setting limits, requests. So you end up every pod being sort of best effort. And then it gets more confusing when you scale the cluster and you start to look at quality of service. Then you realize, okay, so there's quality of service, but then there's priority class. And then there are resource quotas that you can associate to priority class. So how all those dimensions play together and will eventually dictate how Kubelet and the scheduler will plan for new workloads and evict pods. So it's quite confusing, right? So you want to the idea is how can you automate some of the process to reduce the complexity.